Joining us now, Joe DiGenova, legal analyst, former U.S. Attorney to the District of Columbia, and a regular here on Mornings on the Mall. Joe, good morning.
Good morning.
We wanted to talk to you about John Brennan, who has been making the rounds, quite vocal this weekend on the talk shows. And one of the things that he addressed on two different shows was legal action against the Trump administration for revoking his security clearance. Does he have any kind of case at all? Is there any kind of precedent that would allow him to sue to maintain his security clearance?
The short answer is no. That won't stop him from making the effort if he's funded by George Soros or someone else, perhaps the Southern Poverty Law Center. Brennan is a very troubled man. He is emotionally unstable. It is very, very important to have revoked his clearance because he is basically dangerously irrational. They cleaned him up for his Sunday appearance on Meet the Press. They got him in a suit and had the tie, make sure it was tight up against his collar, so he didn't look like a raving lunatic. He's usually been flailing away looking like a madman. They calmed him down. Perhaps they put him on meds. He has no legal basis whatsoever. I have a security clearance for a matter in a case, a top-secret clearance. They can take it away anytime they want. He has an administrative right of appeal, actually, if he's a government employee. But since he's not a government employee, he doesn't even have an administrative right of employee anymore. If he files a lawsuit, the government should seek sanctions against him for the cost of defending the suit. Brennan is nuts, in short.
What do you make of all of these intelligence officials, dozens of them now, who have come out and say that this is a threat to free speech, and they're upset that the President of the United States would take away a security clearance from John Brennan?
Well, let me just say this. These are supposedly 12 very smart people who used to be very senior officials, Michael Hayden, Leon Panetta. It's an endless list of formers. They're all dumb as a post, apparently. John Brennan hasn't shut up for 1 minute. Taking away his security clearance has not affected his free speech. They all admit that the president had the right to take away his clearance, including the 60 other former lower-level intelligence officials who also conceded that the president had the right to take away his clearance, but they bemoan the fact that his First Amendment rights were somehow harmed. I haven't seen any harm. This is actually just politics by another name by all of these 72 people in the intelligence community. And what it does show, it underscores exactly why there needs to be a grand jury into what happened with the intelligence community and the FBI during the election, during the transition, and afterwards. Mr. Brennan was part of a cabal, and I think he's being so vigorous in order to try and protect himself from being investigated. But, let's see if Rod Rosenstein and Jeff Sessions have the kahunas to do what they need to do, which is investigate the coup d'etat. Some call it a soft coup d'etat, which occurred over the last several years.
Joe, the New York Times released a piece, and in it we found out that Don McGahn, the White House counsel, has sat for at least 3 voluntary interviews with Mueller's team that totaled 30 hours over the past 9 months. Was this a mistake?
No, the original strategy was to cooperate fully. They turned over more than a million documents to the special counsel. They've had more than 30 people from the White House interviewed without invoking executive privilege or attorney-client privilege. McGahn was able to testify with the consent of the president. They waived executive privilege and any type of attorney-client privilege that might exist. Whether or not they would have agreed to that today, looking at the bad faith effort of Mueller, is another question. But the decision at the time is defensible. Cooperate fully and try to get it over with. Let's all remember one thing. This is really important for our WMAL listeners. Mueller has already conceded that he cannot indict a sitting president. So what he is doing is he's not investigating a crime. He's investigating for a report and for a referral for impeachment to the House of Representatives. If he were to subpoena the president, for example, and the president says, I'm not going to sit down for an interview, that subpoena by the grand jury, not for a criminal case, but for purposes of an interview for impeachment, would be unconstitutional and illegal. And that would be almost a basis for firing him. You cannot use a grand jury in an impeachment proceeding. And that's exactly what Mueller is trying to do. And it's really regrettable that Rod Rosenstein, who started this whole mess, we wouldn't even be here today if it weren't for this moron, Rod Rosenstein, this coward, gutless Deputy Attorney General, we wouldn't even be here. Let's see if he reins him in. Guess what? Rosenstein will never rein in Mueller, because this is all about getting along with the good old boys.
Yeah, I mean, the fact, and we've talked about this many times, Joe DiGenova, but the idea that this is all being used to present a report to Congress for a recommendation potentially of impeachment rather than an indictment, which Mueller, as you said, rolled out, this idea that he could indict a sitting president, puts the president in a unique legal position, which is very different than any other sort of criminal subject would have to face, which is perjury traps and all the things that they might say in an interview. Does that favor sort of openness? Like this idea that Don McGahn sat down for 30 hours, it might in the end be better in a situation where Mueller is going to have to draft a report because they're being very forthright in trying to win the public relations battle you need to win before Congress.
Yeah, it might in a fair situation where you had a reasonable prosecutor and a fair press. And just think, if the Democrats take over the House of Representatives, do you think it's going to make any difference to them that the president cooperated? They're going to think of all sorts of loony reasons why he cooperated. They're just out of it. They're out of their minds, the Democrats are.
Right.
No, here's the bottom line. No matter what this president does, the people who want to destroy him, which includes the Washington Post and the New York Times, most of the mainstream media, will never believe anything that either he says or anyone says on his behalf. And so from my viewpoint, at this point in this quote-unquote investigation, no cooperation whatsoever now. Take the special counsel to the hoop, make him litigate a subpoena, and believe me, if the special counsel is dumb enough to issue a subpoena to the President of the United States in these circumstances, he will lose in the Supreme Court in a New York minute.
Very interesting. Well, Joe, thank you so much. There are so many more questions to ask you. I always think every Monday, what are we going to talk to Joe about? And it never disappoints. There's always so much. So thank you so much. We appreciate you joining us.
Guys, take care.